All right, today we are jumping headfirst into the timeline of one of the most pivotal events in all of history. We're going to be piecing together clues from scripture and history, playing detective to investigate a 2,000-year-old mystery that might just challenge a tradition you thought you knew inside and out. You know the story. For literally billions of people, it's set in stone. A Good Friday crucifixion, a quiet Saturday, and then a Sunday resurrection. I mean, this tradition has shaped our calendars and entire cultures for almost 2,000 years.
But here's where our investigation really kicks off. What if that timeline we all know so well just doesn't add up? What if the central prophecy about the event makes a Friday timeline a flat-out mathematical impossibility?
Okay, this right here, this is the foundational clue, coming straight from the source. Jesus himself sets the standard. He links his time in the tomb directly to the story of Jonah. And notice how specific he is. Not 1 day, not 2 days, but 3 days and 3 nights. This is our benchmark. This is the ruler we have to measure any timeline against.
So let's dive into this. This prophecy, it's known as the sign of Jonah. And it's not just some throwaway comment. Nope, it's presented as the definitive sign. So what does it actually require? Let's break it down.
The language couldn't be more explicit. 3 days and 3 nights. If you take that literally, you need 3 full 24-hour cycles. That's a minimum of 72 hours. And the sources we're looking at today suggest the actual period was probably even a bit longer, closer to 84 hours.
Now, when you put the traditional timeline right next to the prophecy's demand, well, the problem becomes crystal clear, doesn't it? A burial late on a Friday to a resurrection early Sunday morning, that gives you, at most, about 36 hours. That is a full 36 hours short of the absolute minimum requirement. We're only halfway there.
This visual really just drives the point home. Our source material frames this whole thing as a choice. Are we talking about cutting corners on a prophecy, or fulfilling it above and beyond? And as you can plainly see, the traditional timeline doesn't even get close to that 72-hour minimum. This huge gap is our first major clue that we need to be looking for a different timeline.
So, okay, if it wasn't a Friday, then when was it? Well, our next clue comes from some very important eyewitnesses, specifically the women who went to anoint the body with burial spices. And believe it or not, their actions present this fascinating little logistical puzzle.
Just think about it for a second. The Gospels tell us the women rested on the Sabbath. Now, if the crucifixion was on Friday, the Sabbath is Saturday. So why would they wait all day Saturday only to get up and prepare spices early Sunday morning before heading to the tomb? It just doesn't seem logical, right? The answer, according to our source, is hidden in a detail many of us just read right past. There wasn't just one Sabbath that week.
And this right here, this is where it all clicks. The Gospel of John mentions that the day after the crucifixion was a high-day Sabbath. That's the annual Passover Sabbath, a special holiday. But then, the Gospel of Luke says the women rested on the Sabbath, which refers to the regular weekly Sabbath, which is always on a Saturday. So what you have is a timeline with 2 Sabbaths, Thursday and Saturday, and with sandwiched right between them, a normal work day on Friday. This explains the women's actions perfectly. They rested Thursday, they bought and prepared spices on Friday, they rested again on Saturday, and then they went to the tomb Sunday morning. It just works.
But that raises a pretty big question, right? How could a high Sabbath for Passover possibly fall on a Thursday? Well, the answer is unlocked by a really fascinating detail about first-century Jewish life. They were using 2 competing calendars at the same time.
So get this. In 33 AD, the year our source pinpoints for the crucifixion, there were 2 calendars in play. You had the official temple calendar, which was based on the moon. But then there was another group, the Essenes, who used a solar calendar. And this created a really crucial overlap. The sources suggest that Jesus and his disciples actually observed the Last Supper on a Tuesday night, following that Essene calendar. This was a whole day before the temple authorities held their official Passover sacrifices, which happened on Wednesday afternoon, at the very same time as the crucifixion. Now, this evidence starts to build beyond just fixing a timeline. It builds into what our source calls a divine pattern. So the next clue isn't a day of the week, but a specific number that keeps showing up. The number is 3.5. Yep, 3.5. According to the documents we're analyzing, this number just appears again and again, almost like a kind of prophetic signature stamped right onto these events.
Just look at how this pattern unfolds. First, the Gospels point to a public ministry that lasted exactly 3.5 years. Second,
A Wednesday burial to a Sunday morning resurrection is exactly 3.5 days. That's our 84 hours. And third, ancient prophecies, like in the book of Daniel, talk about the Messiah being cut off in the midst of the week. Well, what's the middle of a 7-day week? Wednesday, day 3.5. It creates this absolutely striking symmetry.
Okay, so let's put all of these clues together. The 84-hour requirement, the 2 Sabbaths, the calendar split, and that 3.5 pattern. Here is the reconstructed timeline for that incredible week in 33 AD, just as the source material proposes it.
The crucifixion and burial happen on Wednesday, just before the sun goes down. Thursday is the high Sabbath, a day of rest. Friday is a work day, which is when the spices get prepared. Saturday is the regular weekly Sabbath, another day of rest. And this brings us right up to sunrise on Sunday, completing a literal 3.5 days, 84 hours in the tomb. The prophecy is fulfilled exactly.
So why in the world do we celebrate Good Friday? Well, the source suggests that as the early church started to grow, it made an effort to distance itself from its Jewish roots. Worship shifted from the Saturday Sabbath to Sunday to celebrate the day the empty tomb was discovered. And over time, that intense focus on Sunday likely caused the timeline to be counted backwards, creating the Friday tradition that we all have today.
This quote from the source really gets to the heart of the argument. It suggests that the 3.5-day timeline isn't just about getting the math right. It's about reflecting a story of divine completeness, of abundance, of fulfilling a promise above and beyond, not just scrambling to meet a bare minimum.
So, in the end, this reconstruction presents a really fascinating case. It's built on clues that are mathematical, logistical, and prophetic, and it seems to harmonize a lot of details that the traditional timeline just kind of leaves hanging. And that leaves us with a final question to think about. Whether this is a brand new perspective for you or one you've heard before, how does looking at the intricate clockwork behind the story change its power and its meaning for you?